Our reading this morning is from the book of Luke 8, verses 26 through 39. They sailed on to the country of the Gerasenes, which is on the opposite side of the lake to Galilee. And as Jesus disembarked, a man from the town who was possessed by evil spirits met him. He had worn no clothes for a long time and did not live inside a house, but among the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he let out a howl and fell down in front of him, yelling, "What have you got to do with me, you Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Please, please don't torment me." For Jesus was commanding the evil spirit to come out of the man. Again and again, the evil spirit had taken control of him. And though he was bound with chains and fetters and closely watched, he would snap his bonds and go off into the desert with the devil at his heels. Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied. For many evil spirits had gone into him and were now begging Jesus not to order them off to the bottomless pit. It happened that there was a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside, so they implored him to allow them to go into the pigs, and he let them go. And when the evil spirits came out of the man and went into the pigs, the whole herd rushed down the cliff into the lake and were drowned. When the swineherders saw what had happened, they took to their heels, pouring out the story to the people in the town and countryside. These people came out to see what had happened and approached Jesus. They found the man whom the evil spirits had left sitting down at Jesus' feet, properly clothed and quite sane. That frightened them. Those who had seen it told the others how the man with the evil spirits had been cured. And the whole crowd of people from the district surrounded the Gerasenes country, begged Jesus to go away from them, for they were thoroughly frightened. Then he re-embarked on the boat and turned back. The man who had the evil spirits kept begging to go with Jesus, but he sent him away with the words, "Go back home and tell them all what wonderful things God has done for you." So the man went away and told the marvelous story of what Jesus had done for him all over the town.
At an earlier stage in my life, I was involved in the lives of junior high and high school age kids and even some elementary school kids. Wanda and I got married in December, right after the semester was over, and we went on a little short honeymoon and did Christmas with my family in the Dallas area. And then we went back to Waco and we had a garage apartment. Neither one of us had a job. So that was job one. I felt like that, if I'm big enough to get married and start a new life, I should be able to get a job. And so I told Wanda, I'm going to take the first job that's offered to me. And I began to sort of go around town and talk to people and see who had a job. The school district, oddly enough, wanted to hire me. And I went to work for the only elementary school in Waco that was racially balanced and had no busing. Pretty cool. But I was also the only man in the school, apart from the nearly retired custodian. He and I were the two men on campus. And I remember, to be honest with you, the teacher's lounge scared me to death. All those middle-aged women, and in the little small room they were smoking and talking adult-like, and just scared me crazy. But what I absolutely loved was my time with the children. From the standpoint, it began to dawn on me from taking Ed Psych and beginning to understand how children and teenagers mature. But I realized that the sign of satire, the sign of smart alecky humor, was a sign of intelligence. That they get it. They get what you're talking about enough that they can make fun of it. And it dawned on me how really, what a great gift that was for them to be able to experience a little cynicism and a little calling out things and laughing at them. This particular story, Diana Butler Bass says, is an example of political satire. Diana Butler Bass is a professor in our time. She goes around talking and teaching, and she points to this story and says, this is an example of political satire. And if there's ever a Sunday morning in which we need to latch on to our senses, after having flown missiles halfway around the world in an amazing show of military might with no permission, we need to have a little political cynicism about what's going on in the world. I've titled this sermon, Legion and the Pigs. And it's a very graphic story. It's in 2 of the 4 Gospels. Mark and Luke both have this story. One's longer than the other. But this is a satire because the humor is twisted on the issue of the pigs. It's the pigs that make this story funny. This is the hermeneutical key to understanding the story itself. She goes on to say this is a form of resistance satire. In the 1st century, it was no joke about the Roman rule in the world. And it was no joke that they were being oppressed by the Roman government. When Jesus stepped onto dry ground, he was on the wrong side of the lake. If you'll just visualize the lake, it's not round, but it's oval-esque. Over on the west side are where all the Jewish communities are, all the little towns, the little villages, most of which highlight in some form or fashion with Jesus and the teachings in the New Testament. And these little villages begin to add up. But once you cross the northern edge and begin to come down on the east side, they become Roman villages. Thus, they are called the Decapolis, the 10 cities. They're not just 10 cities, they're 10 Roman cities. And so here in this story, Jesus and his disciples get on a boat and they cross. This is like maybe Lake Michigan. It's just big, right? You can see the far side, but you can't see much about it. They get on a boat and they cross the lake and they head to the east coast, which is known as the Decapolis. And when Jesus stepped onto dry ground, he was on the wrong side of the lake. Good Jews didn't go over there. What would you do if you got hungry? Well, you couldn't get a meal over on the Greek side, on the Roman side. You couldn't get a meal. There were no Hebrew meals that were served. You couldn't touch anything because you would be defiled. The eastern shore of the Galilee is a region known as the Decapolis, the 10 cities. There were 10 Roman communities, segregated from, but in view of, the Jewish villages. They looked at one another across the lake or the sea. And traveling from village to village on the east side of the lake, was almost unheard of for someone who was supposed to be a God-fearing Jew. An observant Jew could pick up a good kosher meal for lunch on the west side, but not on the east side. If you visited the pagans on the east side, you almost surely violated the holiness rules. Those are in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scripture. They're very, very strict. They're unbending. And for Jesus and his disciples to go over there with intent was an amazing thing. One commentator described it this way: on the east side, among the unclean, unholy Gentiles, nothing was kosher, and everything was unclean. The spirits, the pigs, even the territory itself. And Jesus risked contamination. The fact that they got in a boat with intent and went over there is an amazing thing, because Jesus was risking the contamination of their holiness. And it looks like it's for this one man that they encounter. Jesus got out of the boat and was immediately face to face with what the New Testament calls the demoniac, someone who was filled with demons. He had no name, he had no home, he had no community. He lived in the graveyard, for goodness sake, the site of the unclean, the city of the dead. And Jesus did not want to go to the middle of town. He was happy enough to meet this man, this troubled man, and he landed in the liminal space, the in-between space, between town and country, between farmland and desert, between land and sea, and even between life and death. And Jesus asked this nameless man his name. Today, we would look upon that encounter and suggest what Jesus was trying to do was to locate the man in his own sense of self, to locate him in a heritage that included a name, to see if he could connect him to his reality. And it was an attempt to help the man locate his identity. Some of you have worked either in psychology or social work or schools or almost an uncountable number of careers in which you work with people such as this. And you realize how important it is to help the troubled one to find themselves. They find themselves in their own identity, perhaps. And when the man heard the question, he had a single word answer: Legion. This is where the satire begins. Legion is the Roman word for the massive number of Roman soldiers. Some would say between 2,000 and 4,000 men who kept the peace through oppression. They didn't care so much about the peace, they cared about the peace of Rome, so that Rome was not troubled. And these men would use oppression, they would use pain, they would use suffering, and they would turn the native people into servants of Rome. This man understood something vital about this misidentification, calling himself Legion, calling himself by the word that was used to describe the armies of Rome that inhabited his country. But you know, we see people like this all the time. All of us recognize the demoniac every now and then. This is the way the New Testament refers to them. They're not a part of a community. They're separated from the community. They're like invisible souls that wander around in plain sight on the fringes of communities that we inhabit. Sometimes we bump into them. Sometimes we have to step over them. Sometimes we have to avoid their smell or avoid their muttering about life. We have to ignore all of that. They walk aimlessly in an indeterminate age. They're neither young nor really very old. Some of them have a place to sleep. Honestly, they have a home, but they don't stay there. They go out into the community. They choose to live outdoors. They're in our parks. They're sitting on benches. Sometimes they're sitting right in front of the grocery store with their feet trailing out, that you have to maneuver around them. The police can't seem to do much about them, and the store owners hate it. But sure enough, that's the way some people choose to live. So they end up in the public spaces. They have a few things, maybe in a shopping cart, or a bag, or a box. They're waiting for something to happen. But what? I don't know. Sometimes they have a little plate out that they expect you to drop your coins in, your pocket change. And today the demoniac would likely be considered someone with a disturbing form of some undiagnosed mental illness. I say undiagnosed, I mean people have their opinions about them, but they usually don't come under the inspection of those that are trained to know what it is that they are experiencing or why. And the signs of mental illness, though, are clear. Isolation from society, that's one. They don't seem to have any friends. They don't seem to have any family. They don't have people that they relate to. Homelessness, it doesn't look like they have a home. A distorted view of reality. They might know it's day or night, but they don't seem to know much about a typical reality. And no sign of a family or a community. These are the people who have let them go. The futility of trying to help them shows up. And so Jesus stepped off of his boat and came face to face with this man. He was howling, he was injuring himself, and in his day they considered him demon-possessed. I say that because today would be fairly hard-pressed to say he was filled with demons, but we would want to diagnose him. We would want to get him to some care facility if we could. It's very, very difficult. It's perplexing. Churches are a pretty good magnet for the homeless in the community. They'll show up, they'll knock on the door, they'll want to come in the office, they want to ask the secretary whom they encounter, or the pastor or the minister, whether we can give them. Typically, it's money. In our own day, what we would want to do is to hope to treat some of these persons with psychiatry or psychotropic medications to stabilize them. That's a pretty hopeful wish because it's extremely complicated. Or at least in our society, we might connect this person to some resource that they need. Being the pastor of a church, I get to see my share of them. Heather, our office, she's in charge of the world, the whole world. Heather sees these people more than I do, actually. In some ways, she's protecting me from them, but every now and then I get my chance as well. When I was doing clinical work in San Antonio as a part of my studies and my degree, I saw the full range of people. People would come to, I counseled with the Ecumenical Center for Religion and Health in the medical center, and it was quite the amazing open door, and people would come in, and some of them would have appointments and some of them not. If they didn't have appointments and I was on duty, I got to see them. So I saw a lot of different things. Amazing. In particular, I saw a patient one day fractured by his psychosis. I spent an hour sitting in a nice office with him. I listened and he talked. A single hour. I could not wait for the hour to be over. To be honest with you, it was extremely difficult. The more we talked, the more I realized there wasn't much therapy to be done by me or really by him. He needed a psychiatrist. He needed someone who could deal with the sense of his self that had just disappeared into this psychotic state. He described a violent wish that he had. I could not wait to get out of the room with him. I was afraid of him, to be honest with you. He needed to either be hospitalized or to have mood-altering drugs administered to him by a psychiatrist. I never once considered him demon-possessed. That's what the Bible is doing with this man. That is the assumption, that is the treatment about that. I never considered him possessed by demons. The thought never hit me. But that would have been what the first century would have done, as it does in this story. No hope of treatment or cure. I did what I could in that hour's time by referring him to a psychiatrist. And he was absolutely free to walk out having done no action at all. I had no authority. He didn't have to do anything that I suggested to him. He was free to seek help or not. He could have easily ended up like this sad man left to wander among the tombs. And maybe he did. He had a business that he ran of doing yard work in San Antonio. But he had lost touch with the sense of reality. And that line between sanity and craziness can be hard to locate. It's more of a band, and there are some things that push it into the band of separating the two, and other things push it all the way over into the other arena. Sometimes it's a hermit that we see, driven to spending their lives exploring the life of the Spirit, drawn to the empty places. There are people who are fully sane, and yet they disappear into the desert, or perhaps to the high places where the air is thin. But those with mental illnesses, you can look under almost any busy bridge. You could drive around in the downtown and the greater downtown area and see the people sitting in the doorways. They're drawn to the dark and shadowy places. They're dislocated from their families. Meaningful work, they have no meaningful work. They have no health care whatsoever or a home. This is a startling story. When I was a pastor in San Antonio, a woman began to attend our church. It was a church about this size, and she would come in and she would sit in the back, and then she would start rocking. And she was rocking back and forth, not looking at anything that I could tell, not engaging with anyone around her. And if you happened to take the seat behind her, you almost could not worship because she was so busy, and this straight face. I tried to say hello to her multiple times. She would come to worship late and then she would leave early. So it was hard to make a connection. It was hard to say, "Hi, I'm Keith. I see you here. Tell me your name." It took a long time to get that far. And occasionally I would get a chance to say something to her, like here, I would be at the back, waiting to see what conversation might greet me in the back, and she might come up to me after we had developed some layers of friendship. She might say to me, "Pray for me." The voices are speaking to me. Very sad. Schizophrenia is an illness that flattened out her personality. And in worship, the metronome of rocking back and forth was a soothing thing for her, but it was such a weird psychic energy, it really bothered people around her. She was quiet, she was non-emotive, and she listened well. Occasionally, she would speak to me. Occasionally, what I learned was she lived in a house, a halfway house, about 5 blocks away, and she would walk stiffly on Sunday morning and come and arrive and worship with us. One Sunday, the staff had talked about her, and we realized what an incredibly intelligent woman she was. She was afflicted, but she was highly intelligent, and we invited her to read the scripture in the service. It was a risk. We didn't know what she might do or what she might say or some kind of strange behavior, but she got up and totally stiff and totally monotone, but she was exquisite. She read the Bible in fact, when she first spoke, it sort of woke everybody up because no one had really heard her pronounce language as clearly as she did in that moment. And so in her intelligence, even though she had this disease that she was fighting, she meekly but pronouncedly read the Bible. And in the end, upon his healing, this man struggled, the man named Legion, to re-enter the community. He wasn't quite sure what to do. There was a healing that took place, and he begged Jesus to go with him back to his community. And Jesus gave him a simple prescription. Go back and tell them what great things God has done in your life. Wow. He gave the man a prescription, which is something like, something that was found on the ground. It was so obvious. His approach was to have him go back and connect with the community and tell them what great things God had done in his life. Well, give it up to the demoniac because of his courage in staying. It's nothing less than breathtaking. Ours is not a retreat from the world, taking us out of the brokenness of the world, of shielding us, shielding me in an office where I'm not in connection with the community that shows up, perhaps, or for you or others. Maybe we run into these people. Maybe we see them regularly in the grocery store, and we've never said a word. Sometimes that is a big, big step to do. It is a marvelous gift of freedom from possession, though, by the evil powers of the world, so that we can offer a voice of peace and hope. Jesus' prescription to the man in the cemetery: go back. Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you. God bless the quiet people in the world that we're afraid to talk to. Give us the courage and the energy to step out and to reach out and to extend love. Amen.